Hi, everyone. Please come on in and find a seat. We'll get started in 1 minute. This is your 10-second countdown to come on in and find your preferred spot in the auditorium. Good morning, everyone. My name is Crystal White. I use she, her pronouns, and I am so happy to be welcoming you to the Ethical Society and to serve as your volunteer host today. Whether you are a longtime visitor, longtime member, or visiting for the very first time, whether you're here in person, joining us online, we are so glad that you're here, and I am so glad to welcome you to the Ethical Society of St. Louis. The Ethical Society is a humanist congregation where people come together to explore big questions, to inspire ethical living, and to work toward a more just and compassionate world. Each Sunday, we gather here in this room to reflect, connect, and renew our commitment to those shared values. August, my favorite month of the year, is Members Speak Month, where members of our community take the stage to share reflections, stories, and ideas. And I'm so glad to see so many people here to celebrate Alex, who will be our speaker today. Before we begin, please take a moment to silence your devices or to switch them to Do Not Disturb or to airplane mode so that we can all stay present together. Thank you for being here and for being part of our community of thought, care, and action. Our musician today is Claire Alexander. Exactly right. Claire currently serves as the Ethical Society's Executive Director of Community Experience, but she has spent many years studying, teaching, and performing music. Please join me in welcoming Claire as she performs our first musical selection of the day, Lullaby by the Chicks.
Hi, good morning. I was inspired by Alex's choice to reflect on his own family experience today in his platform. So I picked a song that is a lullaby for a little one while my 4-month-old Nora is at home. They didn't have you where I come from. Never knew the best was yet to come. Life began when I saw your face. Now I hear your laugh like a serenade. How long do you wanna be loved? Is forever enough? Is forever enough? How long do you wanna be loved? Is forever enough? 'Cause I'm never ever giving you up. I slip in bed when you're asleep. hold you close and feel your breath on me. Tomorrow there'll be so much to do. So tonight I'll drift in a dream with you. How long do you wanna be loved? Is forever enough? Is forever enough? How long do you wanna be loved? Is forever enough? 'Cause I'm never ever giving you up. As you wander through this troubled world, in search of all things beautiful, you can close your eyes and you're miles away, and you'll hear my laugh like a serenade. How long do you wanna be loved? Is forever enough? Is forever enough? How long do you wanna be loved? Is forever enough? 'Cause I'm never ever giving you up.
I don't know if you all know this, but Natalie Maines wrote that song and sang it to her son over and over again. And then her son grew up and went on tour with the Chicks. And I'm envisioning Claire singing this song to baby Nora in a very musical household, and just dreaming of the day of Nora being up here singing with you too. Each week, we read the Ethical Education for Youth core values as a way to bring us together and to remind us of our shared commitments. Since Seek is on summer break and my daughter said no, I'm going to read the core values today. Every person is important and unique. Every person deserves to be treated fairly and kindly. I can learn from everyone. I'm a part of this earth. I cherish it and all the life upon it. I learn from the world around me by using my senses, mind, and feelings. I'm a member of the world community, which depends on the cooperation of all people for peace and justice. I can learn from the past to build for the future. I am free to question. I am free to choose what I believe. I accept responsibility for my choices and actions, and I strive to live my values. It's now time for opening words, a chance to hear directly from one of our Ethical Society members or staff. Each week, a member of the community shares something meaningful to them, a story, reflection, experience, or interest, and it's one of the most powerful ways we deepen our connections and learn more about one another as individuals. Please join me in welcoming our creative director, Louise Jett.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Louise Jett, and I am the creative director here at the Ethical Society of St. Louis, a place that often makes me think, if this isn't nice, I don't know what is. That's a Kurt Vonnegut quote. It originates from his book, A Man Without a Country. In this collection of short stories and essays, Vonnegut recounts a lesson from his uncle Alex, who emphasize the importance of recognizing and appreciating moments of happiness. Uncle Alex would often interrupt pleasant moments, such as drinking lemonade under an apple tree, to say, "If this isn't nice, I don't know what is." This mindset encourages mindfulness and gratitude in everyday life. When I think about what it means to be here with you today, the first word that comes to mind is gratitude. Gratitude for this space, this community, and for the chance to practice ethical humanism together. For me, ethical humanism is not just a philosophy that we talk about, it's a way of life we try to embody. It calls us to look at one another with respect, to recognize each person has inherent worth and dignity, and to act in ways that bring more compassion and justice into the world. That's a big vision, but it starts in small, ordinary moments, and I see those moments here every Sunday. I'm grateful for this building, which has held so many of those moments. Celebrations and memorials, music and mindful silence, questions and conversations. Every time I enter this room, I feel our living history, generations of people trying in their own imperfect ways to live with kindness, fairness, and purpose. I'm also grateful for the people who make our Sundays possible. The staff, the volunteers, the teachers, the musicians, the greeters. We know that deed comes before creed. And here, that truth is visible in every quiet act. Setting up chairs, brewing coffee, teaching children, lending a hand. These deeds are more central to ethical humanism than any words I could say. Most of all, I'm grateful for this community, for all of you. Ethical humanism reminds us that we are deeply interconnected, that we shape one another's lives through our choices and our care. And I see that in abundance here. People comforting each other in grief, celebrating each other's milestones, standing together for justice, and listening deeply, even when we don't agree. That web of connection is what turns our philosophy into a living, breathing reality. I invite you to think of one thing, just one, that you are grateful for today. Maybe it's this community. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a simple joy in your everyday life. Ethical humanism teaches us that meaning is not given from above. It is made through our choices, our relationships, and our awareness. Gratitude is one way that we can create that meaning together. I am grateful to be here with you. I am grateful for the Ethical Society of St. Louis and our values, which guide us to live with intention and compassion. And I invite you to carry a moment of gratitude and the spirit of our community into our gathering today and beyond. Because if this isn't nice, I don't know what is. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise, not only for centering us with gratitude as the best attitude, but for bringing Kurt Vonnegut into this space. I know he's one of your highest heroes. If you're a member and you would like to share your opening words in the future, we would love to include you up here on the podium. Please reach out to the Platform Speakers team at platformteam@ethicalstl.org, and we'll be happy to get you on the schedule. Claire has already made her way back up to the stage. Please welcome her as she performs Murder in the City by the Avett Brothers.
This is another reflection on family. If I get murdered in the city, don't go revenging in my name. One person dead from such is plenty. No need to go get locked away. need to get over alarmed. I'm coming home. I wonder which sister is better, which one our parents love the most. I sure did get in lots of trouble. They seem to let the other go. A tear fell from my father's eye. I wondered what my dad would say. He said, I love you and I'm proud of you both in so many different ways. If I get murdered in the city, go read the letter in my desk. Don't bother with all my belongings, but pay attention to the list. Make sure my mother knows I loved her. Make sure my sister knows the same. Always remember there is nothing worth sharing like the love that let us share our name. Always remember there is nothing worth sharing like the love that let us share our name.
Thank you for that loving tribute to family. Before our main address, we like to take a moment to still our minds, relax our bodies, and take some mindful, deep breaths. Please join me for 1 minute of mindful breathing. Thank you. Our speaker this morning is Ethical Society member Alex Braitberg. Alex is a dad, a lawyer, an Ethical Society of St. Louis member. He studied political science, philosophy, and religion at Cornell University, where he earned his bachelor's degree, and then he received his law degree from St. Louis University. An experienced public speaker, he has litigated high-stakes cases on behalf of plaintiffs around the country, and he's competed in hundreds of public debates, including as a humanist advocate. In addition to these, he has presided over multiple humanist events, such as weddings and funerals, and has written extensively about related topics. He also loves spending time with his 4 kids, and sometimes can be seen playing the saxophone in the Ethical Band. And if you like what you hear today, feel free to come back. Next Saturday, you'll be able to hear him solo with the band at our concert. Please join me in welcoming Alex Braitberg.
Good morning. I'm so grateful to be here and so glad to see all of you here today. The topic today that I'm going to address is humanism and the Holocaust. So I will talk a little bit about my family background and survival story, and I'll also talk about some philosophical implications and things that I think we can take away from that experience. But before I start with that, I have to acknowledge, I think, the Palestinian genocide, because that sort of looms over this topic. And when I was thinking about, can you hear me okay? I think I'm feeding back when I get too close. Is this good? Good, okay. So my grandparents, whose story I will share today, were Zionists. When they escaped the Holocaust, there was no Israel to flee to. They would be saddened by the extermination of Palestinians at the hands of Israel. In my opinion, there is nothing more anti-Semitic than committing genocide in the name of the Jews. And as I was thinking about how to address this topic in the context of what I'd planned to speak about today, I thought at first that perhaps my family's story might in some way be cheapened by these recent tragic, awful events. But as I thought about it more, I don't think that's true. But I want to share with you, if I could, an article. Back in 2009, my cousin, my dad's cousin, Jean-Maurice Braitberg, my dad is Misha, he's here, and you all may know him. We had a little family debate back in 2009 when Jean-Maurice took the position that my great-grandfather, Moshe Braitberg, who's my dad's grandfather, who was murdered by the Nazis at Treblinka, that Moshe's name should be removed from the memorial at Yad Vashem because of what was happening in Palestine. And you know, we disagreed a little bit about this as a family, how to handle this, whether we agreed with that. And you know, I talked about this with my father. It's hard for us to know what's happening there, but it's also hard to deny some of the things that we see, such as it appears that Israel is regularly mowing down Palestinians waiting for food aid. So, you know, as a person who's a descendant of Holocaust survivors and someone who feels a great deal of loyalty to Israel because of the fact that my grandparents were Zionists, this puts me in a sort of position of cognitive dissonance. But I think it is important to acknowledge that this is happening, and even a group of people that was targeted before could be the perpetrators. And what we have to learn from this is, I think, the things that cause genocides to happen, and how do we avoid that, whether it's the Holocaust or what's happening today, whether it's Cambodia, Rwanda, whether it's any of the Native American genocide in this country. What drives those things, and how do we respond as humanists and sort of integrate that with our philosophy? So I believe that part of, or maybe the main part of what enables genocide to occur is the concept of the other, or sort of us versus them. And as I'll discuss later, there is strong evidence that humans share certain universal values, which ultimately are the products of evolution. Our evolutionary legacy includes a tendency to cooperate, but also a tendency to compete. Palestinian academic Edward Said said, "To build a conceptual framework around a notion of us versus them is in effect to pretend that the principal consideration is epistemological and natural. Our civilization is known and accepted, theirs is different and strange. Whereas, in fact, the framework separating us from them is belligerent, constructed, and situational." So I want to return a little bit more to the philosophical framework, but before I do that, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. You heard a little bit about that. My 4 beautiful children are here. My wonderful partner and her daughter are here, so I'm very grateful for their presence. I'm a lawyer. I represent plaintiffs in class action litigation. I've done litigation all across the country, taking depositions in New York, LA, et cetera, and been very fortunate to have been named partner at a nationally known firm that does class action litigation, so I'm very proud of that. Part of my education was, I did study religion and philosophy at Cornell, although I never got a degree in that particular specialty, but I wanted to share with you part of how I came to have the beliefs that I do, which is, I took a class at Cornell called Religion and Reason. And my advisor at the time was in the philosophy department. He was the chair of the philosophy department. His name was Scott McDonald. And he was, well, his name is Scott McDonald. He's still living. But anyway, he is a Christian apologist. He makes his career, much of his career, in writing philosophical writings explaining why Christianity is true from a philosophical perspective. And I took his course. He was my advisor. One of the things that we did in this course was study all of the different arguments for and against the existence of God that philosophers have debated over hundreds or thousands of years. And so one week we would go in and we would talk about St. Anselm's ontological argument or the cosmological argument or the problem of evil. So we would read for and against, we would go and we would talk about it. And so each week that we had this, I went in and I came away with the distinct impressions that the Christians had gotten absolutely crushed. And so I thought, well, maybe next week, Scott McDonald, here's this famous Christian apologist. He's got to have some silver bullet. Maybe next week, the Christians will win. But I kept going week after week, argument after argument, and came away with, well, they really got nothing. So that's part of the reason why I came to have the beliefs that I do, and part of my educational background. And, in that process also, I felt, I came to believe, that God does not exist, but I also came to believe that religion, the institution, is very important, that religion has provided a framework for ethics, for compassion, for giving back to community, all these things that we do. And so that's why I believe that this institution is so incredibly important. There really isn't much else out there like this. And that's sort of almost shocking when you think about it, that here we sit in St. Louis, Missouri in the Midwest, and we have the largest chapter of this thing that seems like it should be really important, but not a lot of people know about. So I'm very grateful to be able to be here and to speak to you, and I'm glad that you all are here and apparently agree with me that this is an important thing to do. So with that, I want to turn to my family's story a little bit, and I want to segue there by saying that if the Holocaust hadn't happened, if these crazy stories I'm about to share with you hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here. So in a sense, it's my story. It's a story of how I got to be here, and it's sort of a strange thing to think that but for this horrible historical event, I wouldn't exist. But that's sort of the mystery of life. But anyway, I want to talk about my grandmother and my grandfather. Both of them were Polish Jews who lived in Poland in 1939 when the Germans invaded. They didn't know each other, but they lived sort of not too far from each other, sort of in the next town over. My grandmother lived in Lodz, and my grandfather lived in Piotrków Trybunalski, so sort of like not too far, St. Louis, St. Charles kind of distance, but they never met. But they ended up meeting each other after the war in the Soviet Union, after they had both had sort of these parallel and extremely perilous journeys of escape. So I'm going to talk about my grandfather's journey a little bit. My grandfather was in his early 20s when the war broke out in 1939 and the Germans invaded. There were 8 siblings. He was the last of 8, and he and his twin brother were unexpected twins, and it put the family in a sort of hardship position. And his father, Moshe, was a World War I veteran, and my grandfather talked about how this had traumatized Moshe and how it sort of loomed large over his life, and he couldn't take his meals inside. He had to go outside and smoke cigarettes, chain smoke, because of he was so used to being shell-shocked in World War I. But anyway, my grandfather wrote memoirs, and this is the cover of his memoirs. They are publicly available online. You can look it up and read it if you like. It's a very interesting story. It's also well written, so I recommend. But I'll read a little bit about that. Before I do, I want to share a map. So many of you may be familiar with the history of World War II, but for those of you who maybe aren't, here's a little bit of context. As you can see, the slide is from the Holocaust Museum, and it's showing the parallel German and Soviet invasions that occurred in the fall of 1939. And so you can see Lodz there, in the map. That's where my grandmother was, and not far from my grandfather's city. So the story is set at a time when there's parallel invasions, and a lot is changing. In Piotrków, they set up a ghetto, and it was one of the first places where they set up a ghetto. And as you may know, a ghetto is a sort of a place where the Jews were confined. There's various levels of sort of prisonness about them. At first, they were more open. Later, they became more like closed. But that was another thing that happened during the Holocaust, sort of before all the death camps and that occurred. So the context of the story is that there had been a ghetto set up in Piotrków, and that's where my grandfather was. And so I'll read a little bit from his book. Early in the war, people tried to escape to the Soviet Union, our closest neighbor. Many actually made it. Most of the older people didn't have the strength or the energy to escape, so they stayed in Poland and tried to survive. Many of us young people felt we needed to leave. Almost everyone tried to dissuade me from leaving, especially Leon. Leon was the name of his eldest brother. Also, Leon is the name of my son. Leon kept telling me that during the First World War, although the occupying army treated the population unfairly at first, eventually everything became orderly again. Still, I remained firm in my decision to leave Poland. My father, too, believed I had a better chance to stay alive in the Soviet Union. At the last moment, Leon decided to escape with me. How do you get out of a country where you aren't wanted and yet you aren't permitted to leave? The trains were full of Germans and Gestapo. If they recognized a Jew, they might easily throw him out from the moving train. There were many corpses lying along the railways. Even if Germans didn't recognize a Jew outside of the ghetto, Polish collaborators knew exactly who was a Jew. The Nazi police were notified immediately. And so to make the 3 miles outside from the ghetto to the railway station was extremely dangerous. But we made the dangerous trek to the station, bought tickets, and boarded the train for Warsaw. The train was packed with German soldiers. Sitting amongst them this way for 2 hours felt like being in the mouth of the tiger. We arrived at Siedlce at midnight. Siedlce is a little town that's halfway along their journey, roughly. I don't know, maybe I have a map. You can see Piotrków, they're going to Warsaw, and then Siedlce, and then the border there is shown. That's roughly the border they had to cross, which is the present-day border of, this is a present-day map, that's the present-day border of Poland, but it was, at that time, the occupied border. We arrived in Siedlce at midnight. It was already December, cold, and we decided to stay at the railway station, where it was warm for the night. Inside the railway station, it was very crowded. There were hundreds of people, mostly Jews, on their way to the Soviet Union. Suddenly, a horde of Nazis, yelling and screaming, ran in and attacked the people, kicking and hitting them with sticks and rifle butts. It was hell, Nazis cursing, women and children crying. My brother and I somehow escaped being hit. Then suddenly, a German officer came running towards us, ready to hit us with the butt of his rifle. Noticing my violin case, he stopped and asked what was in the case. When I told him it was my violin, he ordered me to play for him. I played a Mozart concerto. While playing, I observed his face change, becoming more human. Tears appeared in his eyes and ran down his cheeks. When I finished playing, he stood silently for a few seconds and suddenly started to search in his pockets. He found a cigar and handed it to me, then a piece of chocolate and a German mark. He handed it all over to me. He began to speak in a soft human voice. He wanted me to stay here and wait for him. He was going to bring me food and money. Dawn was breaking. After the German officer left, my brother and I left too. So that is, I don't know if you noticed, but you were hearing that music live from the back of the room. That was Tova, my sister, who is here as our secret special guest. So that is one of many narrow escapes that my grandfather experienced. I'd like to share a little bit of a story from my grandmother's journey as well. She had to escape from the Nazis at least twice. She made a journey also along this way to the river to the Soviet Union, but then was conscripted by the Soviet army, and in 1941 ordered to Ukraine, to the front lines, to dig ditches for the Russians, and found herself trapped again behind enemy lines. This is a copy. She also wrote memoirs, and this is also publicly available. You can Google it if you're interested. But this, I have shown you now a map of Ukraine to set the stage for this portion of my grandmother's story. As I said, she was sent to the front lines to dig ditches after being conscripted by the Soviets. And when she got there, the Germans had already taken over. And so she found herself alone again behind German lines, and now had to walk for approximately 2 months to try to get back to the Soviet border. But I will also share a story that she wrote about this period of time in her life. We came to a village very close to the front line where the German soldiers would not let us pass through. We slept in the house of a woman who recognized that I was Jewish. Perhaps so hungry that she hoped to be rewarded with food or money, she reported to the German soldiers the presence of a Jewish girl hiding in her house. 2 soldiers came into the house and asked me, "Jude?" I pretended not to understand, but they ordered me out of the house and marched me toward a nearby woods. A German officer on horseback saw the soldiers leading me into the woods and asked what was going on. The soldier said, "She is a Jew." The officer said, "You are crazy. This is my girlfriend." The officer took me away while still screaming at the rifleman. He told me, "Wait here. I will send a horse and wagon. Go where you want." But I was afraid to wait, and I left right away with the 2 Ukrainian girls walking on to the next village. She goes on, "I want everyone to know that a German officer saved my life. I didn't see him before, and I didn't see him after. And I believe that 3 things contributed to the survival of Jews in the concentration camps. Everybody should know that good people are to be found everywhere. Some Jews were stronger than others. And as important as the first 2, the fact that good Germans and good Christians saved Jewish lives." So I wanted to share these 2 stories in particular because they're both obviously illustrations of the fact that it was a good Nazi who saved both of my grandparents. And I think this is very important in understanding what I was mentioning at the beginning, which is that what drives all of this, I think, in part, is the concept of the other. And it's stories where we recognize the humanity in others despite our differences that I think really inspire us. So this is a picture of my grandparents after they survived. Just wanted to share that with you. But this is a picture of my grandfather's family, and in this picture, only 4 of the 9 people made it. So you can see my grandfather there in the upper left, his twin brother Jacques upper right, his brother Leon at the top. And every time I see this photo, there's Kuba, the little boy at the bottom who perished with his father. And it makes me so sad because I think of my son, because I see his face in Kuba's face. But so some survived and some perished, and those who survived, I think, in part did so because of the kindness of others, even those who were sort of ideologically opposed to them and were out to get them. So I want to switch gears now to talking about philosophy. And what does all this mean? Why is all of this important for us to think about in the context of what it means to be good humans. And I think it's important in many respects. But the first thing that comes to mind for me is the problems that it poses for both Christians and humanists. For Christians, there's the problem of evil. If God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-benevolent, how can there be such a thing as evil? And the Holocaust is a prime example of an evil that doesn't seem like it could exist if we had an all-powerful and all-benevolent God running things. But it also creates a problem for humanists, because, after all, we are here devoted to the project of being good humans. But what does that mean? For Christians, a big argument that they will often levy against those like us is called the argument from morality. The idea that if you don't have a God telling you what is good and what is bad, then you really don't have any moral force behind your ethical beliefs. You're just sort of randomly believing something because you like it. And that's not really satisfying in the way that they say, having a God command you and say, this is good, this is bad. You don't really have any ethical force behind what you're doing. And the Holocaust makes that argument also stronger, because here we are, humans, we're doing this thing, we're genociding each other over and over, it happens all the time. How can we say that's not a thing humans do? Like, we want to be ideal humans, but here we are, and we see that humans are doing this over and over. So how can we condemn that in the absence of religious force? So it creates a problem for both, but I think that the humanists have a better answer. And I'll tell you a little bit about why. I'm going to tell you about why the problem of evil cannot be answered, and why we have a good answer for the argument from morality, even in light of the horrible things that human beings do, such as committing holocausts and genocides. So this is a nice little AI-generated infographic about the problem of evil that I thought was pretty entertaining, so I thought I would share it with you. But anyway, many of you may be familiar with this argument, but it's sort of one of these classic arguments about for and against the existence of God that's been debated over many hundreds of years, and so much ink has been spilled on this argument. But basically what it is if you had, the Christians assume, and other Judeo-Christian faiths believe, that God is and must be all perfect, that God is an all-perfect thing. That is what we worship, an all-perfect thing. Well, what is all perfect? Well, if it's all perfect, it's got to be all-knowing, all-benevolent, and all-powerful, among other things. And the problem is that something that could do anything and knows everything and is also good would not allow evil. That just does not make sense. Now, the answer that the Christians generally have to this problem is, well, it's because of free will. You need to have free will, and that's part of God's plan. Like, if you don't have free will, it's not the thing that God is trying to set up, and so we're not doing the thing that God wanted to do. So free will is essential. Free will is part of God's vision, and if once you put free will in there, then evil starts to crop up, because people can do what they do, and some will make bad choices, and that's just the way it goes. But here's why that argument doesn't work and doesn't hold water. We all know from experience, whether you're religious, not religious, anything, we all know from experience that people have proclivities. People have certain tendencies. There are some mean people, there are some nice people, compassionate people, less compassionate people. We also know that if you take an example from animal behavior. If you abuse your pet, it will not have good behavior. People's abusive histories or other types of traumas make them less able to respond to certain situations. In other words, even if you say that there is such a thing as free will and we all have choices, we also have to admit that those choices are in some way compressed. Like, we couldn't choose just anything. We have tendencies. We have a limited set of choices. We have a history of abuse, of trauma. Some of us are nicer. So even to the extent that free will exists, we have to admit that it's limited in some way, constrained. So wouldn't it be possible for God to just keep the button for free will on and dial down meanness? I mean, he can do anything, right? Like, this is possible because God can do anything. He's omnipotent. So why can't he set himself up a control panel where he keeps the switch for free will on, but just dials down the meanness just a little bit, just dials down our history of trauma and abuse? And this is why the Christian response to the problem of evil is so unsatisfying. Because if God can truly do anything, he can create a world where there is free will and moral responsibility and people are held to account for their actions, but also we don't have genocide. So I think that the Christian answer doesn't really hold water. But what about the humanists? And I think that's really the problem for us, right? Because I think Louise was so eloquent in explaining that we can't just be naysayers, we have to provide a positive answer. And so when the Christian says, yeah, but you don't have a morality that you can really point to and hang your hat on, that's not true. In fact, I think we have an infinite number of answers. And I want to start with what I think of as sort of my answer, or the answer that I like, which is the idea of evolutionary ethics. And this idea, evolutionary ethics, has been unpopular in philosophical circles ever since Herbert Spencer used it to justify genocide, the very thing which we're trying to come up with a theory to condemn. But since that time, other philosophers have tried to rehabilitate the idea of evolutionary ethics, which essentially means that we can draw principles about the way that we should act morally from our evolutionary history. Now, I don't want to suggest that that's the only humanist answer. In fact, it's a pretty uncommon one. I'm pretty unusual, I think, in having that as my answer, maybe. But there are many, many answers that we offer. You can walk into almost any philosophy bookstore or bookstore section in a philosophy section in a bookstore, if you could ever find such a thing in the world, and pull a book off the shelf, and you could find a potential answer, a potential justification, whether it's Kant or Rawls or any number of ethical philosophers who have come up with answers, potential answers to this question of how can we justify morality in the absence of God. But I want to read a little to you from a work by Michael Ruse and Edward O. Wilson. These guys are fairly controversial, but among my favorite philosophers because of their defense of this idea that we can derive ethical principles from from evolution, from the way things are. And when you try to do this project of saying, well, human beings evolved and we're compassionate and therefore that's the way we should act, the general response to that line of argument is, well, what you're doing is you're committing a naturalistic fallacy. You cannot go from is to ought. In other words, anytime you make the transition from the way things are to the way things should be, that's a mistake. And many philosophers believe that that's true, that if you make that transition, you've made a mistake. But the thing is, we have to do that. If we are approaching the question of what should we do, what is the ethically appropriate thing to do, but we don't believe in anything spiritual or godlike, we have to make that transition from is to ought, is my belief. So I want to read a little bit about Ruse and Wilson, and this is a little esoteric, but I think this is helpful in understanding the way in which we can bridge that gap as ethical humanists. For much of this century, moral philosophy has been constrained by the supposed absolute gap between is and ought, and the consequent belief that the facts of life cannot of themselves yield an ethical blueprint for future action. For this reason, ethics has sustained an eerie existence largely apart from science. Its most respected interpreters still believe that reasoning about right and wrong can be successful without a knowledge of the brain, the human organ where all the decisions about right and wrong are made. Ethical premises are typically treated in the manner of mathematical propositions, directives supposedly independent of human evolution with a claim to ideal eternal truth. While many substantial gains have been made in our understanding of the nature of moral thought and action, insufficient use has been made of the knowledge of the brain and its evolution. Beliefs in extra-somatic moral truths and an absolute is-ought barrier are wrong. Moral premises relate only to our physical nature and are the result of an idiosyncratic genetic history, a history which is nevertheless powerful and general enough within the human species to form working codes. The time has come to turn moral philosophy into an applied science, because as geneticist Herman J. Muller urged in 1959, 100 years without Darwin are enough. So I read that a little, it's a little bit esoteric, but I think it illustrates the belief among some philosophers that there is a satisfactory answer to the problem of where morality can come from, even without God. So I wanted to finally look at some of our core values that we heard a little bit earlier, that we hear every week, and think about them in terms of how could these be justified in terms of evolutionary history? How could we make an argument that these principles result from human evolution? And I think it's useful to think about it in terms of how could we make the argument that following these principles would not help us survive? And I think that makes it much starker and much more difficult to dispute these principles. How could you say that it helps human beings who are a cooperative animal, who depend on each other, who stand on the shoulders of each other, who rely on others to make food, and each have to specialize? How could you say that it would benefit us evolutionarily to fail to abide by this principle that every person is important and unique? Because after all, every person has a tremendous investment of time and resources into their education and development. This principle is hard to imagine that you could say, let's not follow this principle and see if that helps us. I think the similar argument could be made for each of these. I've given a very surface level treatment to these philosophical issues, but the main point I think I want you to take away from this is that it is possible for humanists to derive ethical beliefs that are independent of God, and it's possible for those to have strong moral force. So I think at the end of the day, we come from this with the idea that genocide is wrong and should be condemned. So whatever ethical system that we have, we intuitively strongly believe that in order for it to be valid, it must condemn genocide. At the same time, it happens over and over. Genocide does. It seems to be fueled by an attitude of otherization. This is a problem for everyone. Religion has no answer to the problem of evil. Humanists have a problem with answering the argument from morality, but I think we have a better answer. And finally, I think the ethical society is the place where we can promulgate, develop, discuss, advocate this way of valuing human life that does not depend on external validation. So thank you all for sharing my story, hearing about what I have to say about the ethical implications of it, and look forward to speaking with you after.
Thank you, Alex, for sharing your family's story and your reflections on it. The Welcome team will now take up a collection to support the work of the Ethical Society. While many in our community give online or through their annual pledge, we want to offer special thanks to those who give through our weekly collection baskets. Every contribution, regardless of size, helps sustain our programs, our people, and our shared mission. And if you'd like to give today, you can use the QR code on the screen or place a donation in the baskets as they pass around. You can also donate at ethicalstl.org/donate. If you're visiting today, or if you're interested in learning more about us, we invite you to stop by the Visitors Connect table downstairs after platform. We'd love to meet you. I have a number of announcements that I'd like to share with you today. First, in conjunction with the Good Deeds Kid Smart work session that took place on July 29th, there's a collection bin inside the west entrance where you may drop off any and all school supplies. The bin will remain until it's full or until the space is needed for the next collection, which I believe is going to happen next week. So please get your donations in now. You may have seen as you came up the stairs, lots of signs. This one is cute. Woohoo! Members and visitors, today is the day for the highly anticipated ice cream social. Please join us for complimentary ice cream and warm conversation. Yes, I said warm conversation. And there will be a non-dairy selection. Head to the kitchen where the caring team will be doing the scooping. And don't forget the toppings, a choice of caramel, chocolate, strawberry, and whipped cream. Donations are not expected but are appreciated. I have 2 announcements semi-related to Alex. He did not know these were coming. Okay, number 1, to continue the conversation posed today, we'd like to remind you that the St. Louis Holocaust Museum has docent-led tours every Sunday at 2 o'clock. We encourage you to go, participate, and learn. And if you go next week, your tour will be led by Ethical Society member Norm Eisenberg. Norm will be downstairs after platform to speak with you about that in the museum if you're interested. Additionally, you can come back next Saturday at 6 p.m. here in the auditorium to hear Alex and the rest of the Ethical Band perform all your favorite Humanist tunes, plus some new ones featuring the harp and new vocalists. The event is free, donations are accepted. Welcome to all, and the concert is going to be a fundraiser for new Ethical Society AV equipment. We hope that you'll come and jam out with us. The Board of Trustees would like you to save the date for Thursday, the 25th of September, for a special membership meeting that has been requested by petition. We'll come together to discuss how the Ethical Society takes position statements. There's more to come on the full agenda. Please check out your email for more information. Next, I'm sharing an important appeal from our executive directors, Claire Alexander and Rachel Jones. As we move through a time of staff transition, we're encouraging volunteers to step in and support our youth education programs on Sunday mornings. Please help us in creating enriching, welcoming experiences for children and teens from ages 0 to 18. You won't be doing it alone. Volunteers will be assisting our existing staff and lay leaders to help make our Sunday programming strong, sustainable, and safe. Volunteer shifts are on Sundays from 9:30 a.m. to 12:15, now through mid-September. You can sign up for one Sunday or multiple, and signing up early gives you the best chance to serve in the age group that feels like the right fit for you. You can scan the QR code that's in the email newsletter to sign up, or email youth@ethicalstl.org with questions. Thank you for showing up for each other and for helping us care for the future of this community. All right. We would also like to announce Thrive Together, Mind, Body, and Community, which is a new, vibrant community club dedicated to promoting lifelong wellness through mindfulness, physical well-being, creativity, and connection. In our fast-paced lives, we often overlook the simple practices that nourish our mind, body, and soul. So this group is a safe space to pause, grow, and thrive together. So each week we'll explore activities that matter for the mind, like meditation and music, for the body, nutritious food, and for the soul, new experiences and shared learnings. Whether you're looking to start a healthier routine, explore your creativity, or simply connect with like-minded people, this group is for you. So please come to the youth group room, which is downstairs, every Wednesday, 5:45 to 7 p.m., and you can reach out to Vishant Sharma if you'd like to get involved. That was a lot. Thanks for bearing with me. If you'd like to stay connected to the life of the Ethical Society, you can use the QR codes on the screen, one to sign up for our weekly email newsletter and the other to explore ways to get involved. Our weekly newsletter features upcoming events, community news, and opportunities to participate. And the second link lists to a bunch of ways to engage, including opportunities to collaborate with staff and lay leadership on operations or programming, as well as social groups for connecting around shared interest. These member-driven initiatives help us build a vibrant, welcoming community, and we hope you'll find ways to get involved that feel meaningful to you. All right, Claire, you're up for our final musical selection, Go Outside by the Rat Boys.
This one is a fun one about how beautiful the world is and the people inside of it.
Go outside,
I wanna love you till the end. I wanna float off in the sunlight and warm your gentle skin. I wanna love you till the end.
Thanks. Claire knows she's my favorite. I'm always so glad when you're here. Thank you all for being here today, for showing up for yourselves and for one another. I hope today's platform provided insight, connection, and inspiration for you about how we can live better lives. After platform, we invite you to continue being in community with us. We have coffee, conversation, and ice cream in the large room downstairs. And if you're new, you can just follow the crowd or use the elevator out these side doors. If today's platform sparked something for you and you'd like to talk about it more, visit our new Connect with others at our Continue the Conversation table, also in the large room downstairs. It's clearly marked with signage. Folks gathered there are open and ready to reflect on today's topic together. However you choose to spend your time after platform, we're so glad to share this space with you. So make certain you head downstairs for drinks, conversation, and our annual ice cream social. Everyone is welcome. And to give you a preview of what you'll get next week, we'll hope you'll come back next Sunday to hear our conclusion of our Members Speak Month. Our member speaker, Kathy Shrink, who was here and then snuck out, will share how stories and fiction of all kinds can help us not just through life, but to thrive in it. And then before platform, you can hear member Nathan Dunkerley for a forum exploring effective altruism, an approach to giving that focuses on measurable impact. During platform, we'll enjoy our final member music day featuring Bradley Schutz, Lorelei and Kyle Nienhaus, and Jamie Frazier. Thank you for being here, and I hope you'll get some ice cream with us downstairs. Have a great week.